closing out the year with our end of year deal right now. So any donations that come in from November 1st until the end of the year, obviously go to that deal. And our goal is 21,000, and we're just excited about that. And mail outs will go at the end of the month, so if you get something in the mail, you should expect it then. But that's it, that's all I have.
All right, thank you, Brooke. We appreciate what the foundation does for the library. It's really invaluable. We'll move on to the finance committee report. Brad?
Okay, so October is the first month here, so you can see all the data just for the month of October. If you look at the legal read section, you can see that's kind of off from what it's going to be in the end, but just the way the budget and the cash plan is looking, but that should get corrected over time. And really everything else is just 1 month in, so you'll see some things that are different as far as the budget may be concerned. Other things are completely fixed, even though it's just zero right now, for the most of them. The other item to address here is the RFP for security. Go to page 8 here. You'll see that there's one from Hedge. And that's been approved by the finance side, so just
Since it becomes approved out of committee, we don't need a motion. All in favor? Aye. All right, so that is approved. Moving on to the governance committee report, Melissa?
Sure. Beginning on page 37 of your packet, there's several policies coming from the governance for approval. Some of these have to do with updates from our recent collection development revisions, but others are just some things that just need to be updated. So first of all is the public access computer procedures, our computer use policy. And so some of these changes were just updates to kind of modernize the policies, like floppy disk were removed as one of the basically storage device options. It's just nobody's using that anymore. And so some things, just nomenclature in terms of the main library, talking really about some of the branches. And then penalties for violations. We've actually added an additional kind of remedy, if you will, that if someone continues to violate the computer use policy, they can have their kind of the trespass warning for 6 months or longer. But if someone gets that kind of a penalty, if they kind of get barred from use, that they do have the opportunity to appeal to the library board. So that there is a remedy there. There's some language that's been taken out just for consistency. Previously, it was embedded within the policy on the various adoption or revision dates within the policy. Instead, now it's kind of more consistent on the last update being kind of reflected at the bottom. Do you want to do these one at a time?
I think let's vote on one at a time.
Okay. Sure. Any questions?
Any questions or discussion around the revisions to the computer use policy? That comes recommended from governance, so we don't need a motion. All in favor?
Aye.
All right, that policy change is approved.
Okay, the next policy is the display and exhibit policy, and this was previously adopted in May. There's some additional language that's been added that talks about that staff will continue to monitor the exhibits that are in the library system, but basically it kind of acknowledges that sometimes there are unapproved changes. As soon as staff finds out about unapproved changes, they will fix them. And so such things could be someone adds something to the display that was not staff added, or someone takes something away from the display that they might not want to be there. And so the staff is continuing to monitor that, but it's capturing that, that staff is going to be monitoring it, but there are some things that are happening that they'll change whenever they see that there's been a change to the display. So it's just trying to kind of more closely align with the state rules regarding displays to kind of talk about that. So any questions on that one? Okay, that is coming from governance.
All right, if there's no further questions or discussion, all in favor?
Aye.
Policy is approved.
Next is interlibrary loan. And so really the only provision here just says that patrons over the age of 18 with a resident or out-of-county resident card may request an interlibrary loan. What we wanted to make sure is that someone couldn't try to circumvent the collection development policy by borrowing material from another branch. Basically have someone who's a minor borrowing materials from another branch. So this again,
Actually, another library system.
another library system, I'm sorry, I said the wrong thing. So another library system, so this is just to sort of sync up that collection development policy with the interlibrary loan system.
All right, that comes with approval for governance. So any questions or discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
All right, that's approved.
Next one is room policies, and so there's a provision that's been added that only individuals 18 years of age or older can reserve meeting space. This includes study rooms, etc. If there is a fee-based reservation, in other words, there's kind of a contract for this, that it has to be 19 years or older, and that's because in Alabama, you basically have to be 19 to be able to enter contracts, and so it's just making that consistent in our policy. So
It's the larger meeting rooms.
the larger
Yeah,
meeting rooms
yes.
that require fees.
That require fees as well as being 18 to get the larger meeting rooms.
Okay,
These are like
thank
the
you.
auditorium or the classroom space.
Okay, thank you. Any questions on that? So that's the only change on that policy.
All right, that comes approved for governance. If there's no questions or discussion, all in favor?
Aye.
All right.
And finally, the gifts and memorials policy, again, it's just making it consistent with our collection development policy that basically placement of donated items kind of fits in the same rules as our collection development policy. So someone can't circumvent the rules by donating an item that would be otherwise purchased by the library. So that's what, that's just that extra provision there. And finally, the Friends of the Library, basically just some cleanup language. So instead of Friends of the main library, it's just Friends of the Library of the branch where the donation's made. So it's just, again, kind of capturing how things are actually developing in that.
That comes approved for governance. and questions or discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
All right, that's approved. Melissa, anything else from governance?
Not at this time.
I do want to let the board know, I don't know if everybody knows, but the Alabama Public Library Service sent us a letter that they actually sent us to on October 15th and October 31st, approving our policies. So I don't believe we've gotten the state aid yet, but that should be, we've been approved for it, that should be coming. Tanya, are you ready with the executive director's report?
So I just have some information about wrapping up the last fiscal year, which ended up on September 30th, and just some highlights from October. So our system-wide circulation, we actually had a 5% increase comparing this prior fiscal year with the one before. Our area where we had the most increases in our downloadables, so it's about a 23% increase in that particular area. As you can see, the rankings of the branches are similar to what they have been before, with Madison being the highest circulation, South Huntsville, downtown, then Monroe being the top 4. Next is our library visitors. Comparing last year to the year before that, we had about 65,000 more visitors in the library. As far as program attendance, you can see some up and downs, but overall, we still had about a 4% increase in program attendance comparing to the last 2 prior years. As far as visitors, South Huntsville has the most visitors, followed by downtown, Madison, and North Huntsville. So this is just an overview of the books we love in September and October. So we have the top circulating adult book that's in print, top circulating young adult book in print, as well as the top circulating juvenile book. Our highest demand book, which we gauged by number of holds, had 98 holds. And then we had our top circulating digital audio book, as well as our top circulating ebook. So October highlights, we had a lot of Halloween programming. The downtown library had their annual trick-or-treat program, and that brought in over 600 people. And overall, for the weeks up to Halloween, we had over 2,000 events, 2,000 attendees of the Halloween events. So for the month, we had 120,545 visitors and circulated over 254,000 items.
Any questions for Connie? Connie, real quickly, where are we with the architects about the renovations to the downtown building?
So the architects submitted their findings to the city of Huntsville. The deadline was September 13th, but we haven't had a meeting since then to discuss any further findings.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for, other questions for Connie? Thank you, Connie. So under new business, we have a couple of items. One, we need to approve our meeting dates for 2025. Those were in the packet. They're on page 60 of the materials. Hopefully everyone's had a chance to look at those.
I have a question. So there's space being renovated in South Huntsville, correct? Is that
This space.
South Huntsville? Just because obviously all the meetings are North Huntsville to Maine. And then I thought that there was like a space kind of in the same complex that was being renovated.
There is, yes, right across the street from the library.
Oh,
Yeah, so there's space they're renovating over there. I think they're supposed to be done by 2026.
Okay, yeah, I was just wondering because, you know, the space where we used to have board meetings there was pretty tight. So I was with a lot of public comment, wouldn't be able to be there, but would love to still be able to get over there and do it.
Yeah, definitely. We alternate as look at the size of the meetings, and these are the two spaces that can fit the most people.
Okay, yeah, I was just curious because I heard that they were doing some renovation, but it hadn't been by.
Okay, thanks, CW. Any questions about meeting dates? Hearing none, can I get a motion to approve?
Move to approve.
Second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, these are the approved meeting dates for our 2025 calendar year board meetings. The next thing under new business, and this won't take long, is just appointing an ad hoc committee for our executive director search. Connie's done a great job serving on an interim basis, but we do need to move forward and permanently fill that position. I'm not surprising anybody, so thank you to the ones that agreed to participate on that committee, and that's going to be Renee, Doug, and GW. And so I talked with Dietrich, and what we'll do, now that the committee is formed, we'll get with Dietrich and formalize the process and, you know, set some milestones and when we want to get through with it. Okay? All right. That brings us to public comments. Dr. Allison.
Good afternoon, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I wanted to come and speak today because of concern with how the policies this board adopted in response to the administrative code changes are being implemented in our library, and also to give an apparently much needed biology lesson, maybe for our community, on earthworms. First, as you know, the application of the changes to the admin code really is up to how individual libraries define obscene, sexually explicit, and inappropriate for minors. It was my understanding that the library would be applying the legal definitions from the state code in making these decisions. That led me to be confused as to why anything from the children's and young adult sections are moving at all, given the policy citing these definitions. I feel that when you all reviewed the reconsideration appeals that were brought before the board, that you had these definitions in mind, yet several of the books you reconsidered and ruled to leave in the young adult section have now been moved. It seems that the definitions of these terms must have changed. For instance, the book, The Big Bathhouse, that would initially remain where it was located after being challenged, has now moved to the international section in adult fiction because of nudity in the illustrations. Given that this picture book was written as a celebration of a Japanese cultural tradition, a tradition that does not assume nudity to be inherently sexual in nature or inappropriate for children, I fear that there is an overcorrection that's happening in the review based on the admin code changes. So given these inconsistencies between the policy that you all have passed and what's being practiced here. I would hope that maybe we could have some transparency in how the review process is happening, and that a full list of any materials moved in response to the code changes be provided in the board packet once the review is complete. Finally, pro-censorship actors have told us over and over again that they only wanted, quote, sexually explicit materials taken out of the children's section, and we warned you all of what this could lead to. Here we are with the book, Worm Loves Worm, being challenged because of its portrayal of reader-interpreted homosexuality in worms. I was glad to see that the book wasn't moved by the committee, but was sad to see that the explanation given was that the book wasn't clear on the sex of the worms, and therefore it wasn't clear that it was supporting gay worm marriage or worms in the transgender community. Age-appropriate books that are explicitly about gay marriage and the existence of transgender humans should be in the children's section, even with the new policy changes. So I think I wanted to come here today and just say that everyone in our community should know that earthworms are intersexed, meaning they have both male and female reproductive organs. So in fact, the book is actually about a same-sex marriage, since the worms are in fact of the same sex. This book is also of scientific relevance and teaches something that kids should know.
Thank you, Dr. Allison. Thank you. Austin Jones.
Hi there. Mic check. There we go. I stand here before you as a veteran of 21 years of service to our country and a member of the Democratic Socialists of America. And I'm coming to speak on the behalf of the lack of increase in the cost of living for our library workers. The other day I was at City Council and I listened to some 2 hours as a man spoke on an increase to everyone's power bills. I watched slide after slide and listened to several questions about the increase to the residents. What I did not see in those fancy slides, and what I did not hear, and what I did not see in the graphs of the operations budget was, what about the workers? What about the workers? What about them? So I'll state the question here, wall to wall, on every floor and hall. What about the worker? Where is their cost of living increase as the area grows at unprecedented rates? And now, with the new administration coming into office and touting tariffs as their primary focus on economic policy, I'm reminded of the Smoot-Hawley Tariff Act of 1930 that created the global Great Depression. That is the barrel we are all looking down. It's a gun aimed right at us, and I'm asking for some armor for all the workers at our libraries. Now, if you don't know how a tariff works, let me be clear. A good is imported by a U.S. company, let's say Walmart, and the tariff of, let's say, 100% is then paid to the government by Walmart. Walmart then turns around and marks their price up 100%, which is paid by the citizens and residents on top of the sales tax and income tax and property tax and inflation we all pay. The workers deserve an increase. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Jones. Ms. Hunwat?
First off, we would like to thank you for your cooperation in following and complying with state APLS policies of getting sexually explicit and obscene materials out of the children's section and out of the reach of minors. Another hearty thank you for not putting us in a compromising position that could have cost us over $500,000 a year in state funding, resulting in what we heard was possibly the loss of 3 library branches. I feel that your decisions truly reflect the community, the local community as a whole. We all know that President Trump won the presidency not only through electoral vote, but through popular vote as well. The country has spoken. Our nation is sick and tired of extreme and harmful leftist ideologies, which actually ended up costing the Democrats the election, but I digress. Who would have thunk that the majority of common sense citizens would be opposed to sexualizing our children? I'm still utterly shocked that this issue has been drawn out as long as it has, especially being in a solid red state. So let's recap some statistics real quick. Over 65% of the state voted red. In Madison County, there are approximately 415,000 residents. 105,000 of those residents voted conservative, while only 87,000 voted Democrat. And if you look at polling trends, Republicans who live in a heavily red state tend not to vote because they feel it won't make a difference anyway, and vice versa in a blue state. So if we want to look at these numbers through a truthful lens, the 54% or 115,000 voting conservative citizens total in this county is actually much, much higher. On top of that, I have conversed with several registered Democrats here locally, and I have their names and conversations. If you choose to see them, I have permission to share them. I showed them the materials that you once had in the children's section, and they 100% agree with parents like myself that they should not be in the hands of our minors. So essentially, that lowers the 87,000 down to a fraction of Democrats that actually agree with porn being accessible to minors. So what this actually tells us is this isn't even a conservative or a Democrat issue. The majority of people don't want our children to have access to porn, period. So to reiterate, this is a conservative county. Madison County is a conservative county. I don't want to hear one more Breathe Freely member stand up here at this podium or any other public forum and state that concerned parents like myself are some sort of minority. It's just not the truth. No matter how many times they scream it or say it won't make it true. Please continue to do what's best for our community and our libraries, because the reality is that the majority of the library funds come directly from conservative taxpayer dollars, and that's just a fact. But ultimately, this is about protecting our children. Thank you.
Apologies in advance if I butchered this last name. Melanie Pulaski.
Can everybody hear me okay? I have a pretty big little voice, so I would prefer not to hold it. Is that okay?
Yes.
My name is Melanie Pulaski. I live in Madison City, but Limestone County. I typically I've been to one of the Huntsville meetings, but I did not participate and speak because since I'm Limestone County. But I've been made aware that many of the people that come that live in Limestone County, they come and speak here. So I felt the need to go ahead and sign up to speak. I'm not here to really represent my personal beliefs because there's obviously what I think should be in the library is going to be very much more broad than the person that just spoke before me. But what I'm seeing increasingly in these libraries are, we don't need to be here. Everybody on the board, the library staff, they're perfectly capable, they're educated to make these decisions. It's ridiculous. There's people that come here to cause chaos and confusion and to just take up resources. It's ridiculous. The majority of people in our community do not know this. They don't know what's happening. And some of the ones that do, they're being misled by individuals from groups like this. They're shown things that aren't even in Limestone Library for one situation. It's been put on the internet as well, and it's misrepresented. I actually read in the July meeting in Limestone, this book is about a blue crayon that's in a red wrapper. I have a dyslexic daughter. That's what the author wrote this book about. This is on Big Moms for Liberty and to clean up Alabama as controversial. And at the meeting after that in August, it was dug down that this could be gender dysmorphia, which is an inappropriate term, but that's the word that was thrown at me. Things like love makes a family. No one needs to be challenging these things. If they don't, and I think if they do not want their children to see this, they absolutely have that right. I will never stand up here and say any parent should not parent their children. But for us to be looking at things like all are welcome, and the big bath house, it's cultural, it's nudity. I did therapeutic foster care in New York. Nudity does not mean sexual. children need to know proper parts of their body. And I didn't even know the word thing, so I apologize for laughing out loud because I had bought this because in Tennessee, moms got mad because dads carry babies for seahorses. So I bought the book. I like to buy the books and see what in the world. There's nothing wrong with things like this. Parents are capable of parenting their own children, and most of our community would absolutely agree. And I thank you guys for letting me speak.
Thank you. All right, that'll conclude our public comments. Next, I wanted to talk briefly about the statements of concern and make sure everyone knew the process that we've been going through. It was announced at the last board meeting that in light of the adoption of revised policies, all of the appeals and statements of concern were going to go back through their respective committees and be evaluated in light of the new policies that were adopted. So in your materials, it's on page 61, and I'm not going to go line by line, but you can see where we are with respect to some of these the reconsiderations and then decisions that were made. This is going to be in the board packet going forward, so it'll be available online if you can go online and access the board packet and know where these things, where various books are that have been the subject of a statement of concern, where they are in process. So are there any questions from the board about what we're doing there? Okay, we will move right into the next topic, which is a discussion of the board's role in statement of concern appeals. And we wanted to, much like we did when we talked about the appeal process the first time, and then we talked about some of the rule changes, just have a discussion about what we see our role as well as any kind of process type issues. And I know there's been discussion around, does the entire board have to read books that have been appealed to the board? I know I've talked with one or two of you about forming a subcommittee of the board that would read the books, and we just wanted to have a public discussion about people's thoughts and where they were on the issue. So I'm gonna open it up.
I mean, I'll jump in. I know from the governance perspective, in the statement of concern policy, the board is kind of the final arbiter. And I think part of that is there's a lot of attention, clearly, about books and what's on the shelves. And so with the board being kind of a public body, that responsibility kind of falling on us as kind of transparently making those final decisions on the board. And I will say, just this is for me personally, it's kind of I would say somewhat of a difficult role because, I know that, if you do board governance 101, boards are responsible for policy and they're responsible for strategy. And when we get in a situation where we as board members are second guessing the staff's decisions, that's not a typical board responsibility. And so, hence the conflict. However, that because funding's tied to these policies, funding's tied to how we're doing this, it's very much in the forefront and it's very much a political issue. It shows up at city council meetings, it shows up at county commission meetings, etc. That I feel like our elected officials, they're looking to say, how are we handling this, our job as a library board? And so, we transparently all sit here before the public. And so in that way, if we are kind of that final arbiter of where a book is, for me personally, my instinct is to read the book and make sure that I kind of, and in my role as a community voice or a community standards of decency, that's part of our policy, that's what I feel like I need to do to implement that policy. That's just mine.
Thanks, Melissa.
And I think I would go from the call those micromanaging for us to go in and look at a committee. And the committee is based, I think Connie is appointing committee that have grandparents, library staff, foundation board meetings, and they're the ones that make the community standards. We have over 20 books on this list, and we frankly, as a board, don't have time to deal with this stuff when we have professionals who are dealing with it, or also community members. So I don't want to second guess a committee, and if we're having a committee, why do we do it if we're going to be voting, okay, well, that's great that you spent this time reading, but we're going to veto what you did. So I do have a lot of concerns because, you know, we've got 20 on here, there's not, I mean, they're going to keep going and going. Say I'm 61 years old, I have a lot of books on my list, and none of them are in the young adult section. So I don't see that I'm going to be spending a lot of time reading these books.
I'll jump in. Melissa, you mentioned kind of what the board is supposed to be doing in governance, and I actually took some governance course essentially about 3 weeks ago. And one thing that they really did warn us about was not replicating staff duties and staff responsibilities, and make sure that the board is doing what the board is supposed to be doing, which is creating policy. And really, you know, since we're talking about the board's role in statement of concerns appeals, I think our primary responsibility is through policy. We create the policy so that the folks that are in these committees can follow it. So for instance, we had a policy, and they made recommendations based upon that policy. And then we changed the policy. And then they made different recommendations based on that policy. So I think that is really our primary role in how we can affect statements of concerns. Now, we are the final authority in a sense, and so for me personally, I actually lean with you for the book that we had a statement of concern appeal upon that we voted on a few months ago, and for the one that we'll vote on today. I read them. I did additional research, listened to the authors, listened to some scholarly reviews, even met with constituents to talk about it. And that's where I tend to lean personally, but I have an issue, I think, or I'm very, very hesitant to make it a requirement for a governing body to do some of the work that the staff is charged to do. And I say that because I don't really think that any governing body does that, whether local, state, federal, when they pass policies, ordinances, and laws, there's no hard requirement that even the laws are read by those people and those individuals that are voting. Typically, particularly like in those on the federal level, they have staff and people that are professionals, and those are the folks that really read those policies and they advise. And so I think that our role, primarily, we need to look at the statement of concern, look at what's been presented to us, look at what our staff recommends us. If we can do more due diligence, which is what I personally plan to do, but I don't think that it should be a hard requirement, particularly if we're not going to do that with anything else that we vote on. So, I mean, we just voted on several policies, and we just voted to approve the security services. And we didn't say like, hey, raise your hand if you read this policy. I don't think that we should change it for this one particular policy. And so, while I think my position that I'm stating is different from where I am personally, I just think that it's important that we make sure that the board is doing the board's job. Sorry, that's a lot.
Any other thoughts?
I certainly appreciate the different roles in governance and operations. I think you're right, though, it's not our job to manage, and indeed, we're not in there when the procurement decisions are made. We're not trained to purchase and shelve and categorize library materials. But as long as we are the final appeal board, I personally feel a responsibility to read what it is that's being challenged, as for the community barometer that we're appointed to be. It's a lot, but these challenges, it's well taken to the point that it's a lot.
sitting in this seat, I feel compelled to read the books and review them when those appeals come to us.
Brad, Carla, you don't feel compelled to comment. This is just an open discussion.
No, for me.
Well, I just feel that as a board, it is our responsibility to ensure that we are, in the best interest of the library and the public as well. I do feel that we do have qualified staff who are capable of making decisions for collection development, that would be appropriate for the library, but, when it comes down to the very end, we do want to make sure that we are doing what's for the best interest of our library.
Thank you. I really struggle with this. I mean, I certainly don't, none of these books are on my reading list either, Doug. I understand where you're coming from. I do feel, though, compelled to at least familiarize myself with the material, because I do think, at least the environment that we find ourselves in now, and the policy that we're under right now, we're going to be faced with additional appeals in the future. One thing, and we're not voting on anything tonight. We're not making any final decision tonight. I would say, governments just keep looking at this issue, and if there's a way that we can improve the process or the policy, then certainly, let's talk about that in governance, and then let's bring it to the entire board. Any other thoughts on that topic before we move on? All right, we have one statement of concern appeal tonight. Connie, can you present that, please?
So we have a statement of concern appeal for the title Word Loves Run by J.J. Austrian. I'm going to read the statement of concern that he came to submit. So what are your objections to this library material? Last Wednesday, June 12th, I took my grandchildren to the library for story time and to check out books. My grandson is 4 years old. He picked out several books for me to check out for him. I was very disappointed and shocked with one book he picked. The book Worm Loves Worm theme is same-sex marriage is okay as long as they love one another. According to the Bible, if a man sleeps with a man as a woman, they have both committed a detestable act. Leviticus 20:13. The Bible is very clear. Homosexuality is a sin. Why would a public library want to expose a child to a sin that our Lord God defines as an abomination? Would you have storybooks for children encouraging alcoholism or stealing? So why do you have a storybook that encourages same-sex marriage for children? I have no problem you have this book for adults, only to check out if they want to read it to their own child, but to have a book that any child like my grandson did, picking it off the shelf in the children's library, I do have a problem with that. I believe other Christians will have a problem with that too. What harm do you feel this material might cause? The Bible states in Matthew 18:6, but whoever causes one of these little ones who believe in me to stumble in sin by leading him away from my teaching, it would be better for him to have a heavy millstone hung around his neck and to be drowned in the depth of the sea. Why does the Madison County Huntsville Public Library want to expose young children to sin? I feel it is wrong, and I hope you will agree with me and take this book and any other book like this one out of the children's library and put it where only adults can check it out. Did you complete the entire item? Yes. Is there anything worthwhile in this material? No. I don't feel books that expose a child to the sin of homosexuality, which is an abomination to God, should be in the children's library. Have you read any professional reviews of the item? No. What do you believe are the main ideas of this material? The theme of this book uses cute worms as characters to show that same-sex marriage is okay, as long as the worms love one another. As a Christian, same-sex marriage is an abomination to the Lord. This is not a topic a 4-year-old should be exposed to. What do you think was the writer's intention in creating this work? To let others know that same-sex marriage is okay, which is not okay according to the Bible. What material with a similar purpose would you suggest as a replacement for this item? The only solution is to not have these books available to children. If an adult wants to check these out, then it is fine, but it should never be in the children's section of the library. Additional comments. I pray that you will see why this is an inappropriate topic for little children to be exposed to.
So when the committee initially reviewed the book, they sent a letter. It's in the materials at page 63, dated August 19th, 2024. And the committee basically did not recommend any change with respect to the book's location. The reasons are set out in their letter. When we revised our policy, the committee went back and reevaluated the material, and its findings are reflected in the letter October 31st of 2024, which is on page 64 of your board packet, and concluded that there are no images or passages in the book that meet the definitions for obscene, sexually explicit, or otherwise inappropriate to minors. I've read the book, I've looked at the book online. It does not trigger anything under our policies which are geared towards obscenity, sexually explicit material, or when we say harmful to minors or inappropriate for minors, we tied that to the definition of harmful to minors, which under the Alabama Code involves an appeal to the prurient interest, which is also sexually explicit in nature. So my recommendation is that we vote to uphold the committee recommendation and leave the book where it is. Any further discussion?
I read it as well. I uphold the committee's decision.
I read the book as well. You know, I'm obviously thinking through our policies, and while reading the book, I agree with Kevin. I don't think the book triggered any of the policies as they're stated right now. I'm actually, obviously this individual felt really strongly, and so I'm actually glad that our policy that states that a 4-year-old can't just walk around the library by themselves. They were there to police their own child and make sure that they picked up books that they agreed with. And so I'm glad that policy did work for them. So I actually agree as well that we uphold the recommendation of the committee.
Any further discussion? I think Doug made a motion. Do we have a second? All in favor? All right, that's resolved. Our next meeting date is going to be January 28th, 2025 at 4 p.m. It will be in the downtown library, second floor events room. Thank you very much, and we'll see you adjourned.
Yeah.